Hey everybody, it is Kyla here from the Nutritional Revolution podcast, and today we are talking to Peter Spenuzza, founder of Rise Bar, creator of Rise Bar, and we're going to dive in. I love Rise Bars. I reached out to Peter because I end up basically referring these to my clients all the time. So before we start going down a rabbit hole of what's in the bars, all of that stuff, which we want to know, but I'd love to know a little bit more about you, Peter, and kind of how Rise maybe came to be.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Kyle. I'm excited to be here. I myself have been a lifelong health and fitness fanatic. Back in the 1980s when I came of age, I remember my mom was so ahead of the trend in terms of health. Early stages of Whole Foods, it was called Wild Oats and Mrs. Gooch's here in Southern California. So I was fortunate enough to have two parents who were always really health and fitness oriented. And it just really grew on me, especially throughout my 20s. And once I kind of turned 30, when I started Rise Bar back in 2011, I started to adopt more of a paleo diet, more of a clean eating approach.
Yeah.
And so I cut out a lot of the sugars, a lot of the starchy carbohydrates. And that's for me, like being a lifelong athlete with surfing, with jujitsu, with adventuring, with lifting weights. I've always been really active. So for me, I started to look at food as fuel kind of in my late 20s and early 30s. So it's been pretty deeply ingrained in my DNA for a long time.
Cool. And were you making your homemade like snacks, or I know there's a lot of like homemade bowls and bars and all that stuff. Were you doing that for those sports you mentioned? Like, I mean, when you got out of the ocean from surfing, or how did that happen?
So I've always loved nut butter, been a huge fan of nut butter. As I mentioned, kind of in the 1980s, my mom it wasn't just peanut butters. We were having really kind of obscure at the time. Almond butter wasn't very common, but cashew butters, pumpkin seed butter. And so I've always been a big fan of like the natural fats and kind of the sustained energy boost of nut butter. So
Yeah.
I was always playing around with that. And then just adding a little bit of protein for me as an athlete, which kind of helps with recovery. And then to keep it all together, just adding a very simple sweetener like a honey or a molasses.
Yeah.
A coconut nectar. So that's the architecture of the bar. Really simple.
Yeah.
Never more than 5 ingredients. And for me, it's really key to digestion, just having fewer variables in your stomach.
Yeah. Yeah. And when you, like, what made you start to ponder to create a bar?
So this right around 2009, I was actually working in the medical device industry and was really interested in starting my own company. I read the book 4-Hour Workweek by Tim Ferriss, who is a ubiquitous name by now.
Yeah.
And it really convinced me that perhaps it was time for me to strike it out on my own. So I spent the large part of 2010 kind of researching different spaces, different niches, everything in health and wellness and medical, and saw that within the health and wellness space, even during the Great Recession, 2008, 2009, 2010, it was one of the only niches that was growing at like 10% per year in the double digits. Everything else, as you recall, was tanking. So that kind of, narrowed down the funnel. I said, what do I love? I love health and fitness. I love clean eating. And I know marketing pretty well through my experience with medical devices. So you kind of taking all those things together, I saw that within this high protein category, which for me as an athlete, having a higher protein intake than the average person, I needed at least 15 grams. So I felt like, you know what, if I can create a high protein snack on the go with just minimal ingredients, we're really going to stand out in an otherwise crowded set.
Yeah. Yeah. That's one of the I think the most popular bar that I refer, I think, is called your honey almond bar with the whey protein, because it is 3 ingredients. There's 20 grams of protein in the bar. Like, you can't find that, I don't think, anywhere. Like, it's pretty unheard of unless it's maybe like a soy protein isolate or something. And then like the ingredients list is a mile long. So yeah, I love that bar for sure for a lot of my clients. It's a great one for like on the go or after training session to use to support that recovery. So yeah, so cool. And so with the kind of getting into that field and looking at that and seeing what's growing and what your passions were, did you start kind of playing around with some recipes and getting friends and family to taste test and getting feedback, or kind of how did that start?
Yeah, very much so. I think it was kind of in late 2010 as I started to kind of narrow down what the packaging would look like, what the brand, the naming, the convention, the target demographic. I'm playing around with different recipes, and I quickly found, like, God, it's just simple as so. it's a lot easier, as dumb as that sounds. Once you try to mix in way too many ingredients and variables, it can throw off the whole macrobiotic profile. And so for me, simple was easy.
Yeah.
And I mean, honestly, people can make these in their kitchen. It's just you add a little bit of honey, so sprinkle in some protein powder, and then any kind of nut butter of your choice.
Yeah.
That's kind of the easy architecture of the bar. And as I tested this out with friends, with family, I saw that the response was awesome. But it took me a long time to really dial in. Even when we launched, we had problems with hardness, or it was too sweet, or the quality of the whey isolate. You know, sourcing from different suppliers throughout Wisconsin and throughout Northern California, there's probably 200 different honey suppliers. And just trying to narrow down exactly what the right combination and manufacturing process, all this, was still something that was a work in progress for a few years, even after launch.
Wow. Wow. Yeah. Yeah. That sounds like a lot of stuff maybe that someone might not initially think about when they're designing a bar or coming out with a bar. And so when did you start to realize that Rise Bar was like a success? Because I know you can get it at Costco and Whole Foods and things like that. When did you start to realize, like, oh my gosh, people love this bar, like I'm doing something right?
Well, admittedly, sometimes I still don't think of us as a success story. And that's just kind of my underdog nature. I always feel like there's a lot more room to grow, which is kind of the shadow side of being an entrepreneur. Sometimes things aren't ever good enough.
Yeah.
But where I started to realize where we had traction was probably after about, I'd say 2 years into the company. So it was 2 really grueling years, just trying to like present to as many different customers as possible, trying to get it throughout Southern California and growing from there. There was definitely, and I've heard this from so many other entrepreneurs, there's really no like aha moment or yes, I have this, or this is going to take us to the next level. It was just long, grueling work over the course of time. But I remember, I was probably about 2 years in where I felt like, okay, we're starting to get recognized by some more accounts. People are starting to come to us for the product. We're starting to get kind of more testimonials, more social media growth. But it was by no means overnight. Like I said, there's still some nights where I'm like, man, what is next for us? How do we continue to fuel our growth? And speaking with so many other entrepreneurs who are 10 times our size, it's a very common mindset. You always want to figure out what the next mountain to conquer is.
Totally. Yes. I hear you on that part. I feel the same way with my business. I'm always trying to do the next thing. It's not enough. Right. And so with kind of the bars, what was did you come out with one initial flavor or version, or did you come out with a variety initially?
So there were 3 that we launched, but really it was the flagship. And this is, once again, very common for most startup companies, especially in consumer goods. There's always one champion product. There's always one SKU that kind of brings everyone else into your tribe. And it's still almond honey. It's still a big chunk of our sales, as simple as it sounds.
Yeah.
And it was really the simplicity while also hitting the high protein content. Delicious flavor, but taste is very subjective. For us, what hooks people, I think, is just the 3 ingredients, 20 grams of protein. So although we launched a few other bars, that was the one we always kind of sampled heavily at farmers markets, at little shows and local events and triathlons and mud runs. That's just what people gravitated towards.
Yeah, I love it. And I mean, I love that bar too, but not to be all biased, but, and then with a lot of your bars too, you have vegan options as well, right?
We do.
Yeah. And so are you vegan or vegetarian yourself, or?
I eat a ton of veggies. I try to avoid most red meat. And by red meat, I mean like the heavier beef. I still eat a lot of fish. I mean, fish is incredible.
Yeah.
I love the lean fatty acids and the protein content. It digests really, really well.
Yeah.
I'll incorporate chicken and turkey, but I mean, I've changed my diet so radically where I was a heavy meat eater, kind of that bro CrossFitter back in the first half of 2010 through 2015. So I was eating a ton of meat, pushing 200 grams of protein for someone who's 170 pounds.
Yeah.
And I just realized as I've gotten into my later 30s, it's just having a more balanced diet, less red meat, more fish, more veggie. I can just see how people live well into their 90s and 100s in other countries. It's just like natural fats, moderate amounts of meat, and a ton of vegetables.
Yeah. Sounds like the Mediterranean diet, which is.
And my whole family, we're all like from different parts of the Mediterranean. And I'm
Awesome.
thankful enough to have a lot of relatives live well into their 90s, but
Wow.
they weren't like me who, I put myself through so much grueling exercise and CrossFit for a decade with a
Hmm.
really high protein diet, which it can just really, for me personally, was
Yeah.
taxing my stomach, taxing to my kidneys, and
Yeah.
scaled back a lot. And I found, wow, I'm still able to lift heavy. I'm feeling more mobile than ever before.
Yeah. Awesome. So with kind of the bar world right now and kind of Rise Bar, how many different flavors do you guys have now?
Right now, we have 8 flavors, and I think on the topic we were just on, I know that plant-based is a really, really key, huge trend right now, and I do believe for a lot of people, plant-based can be an incredible approach.
Hmm.
We're finding a lot of traction with our plant-based SKUs, so that's where we're going to continue to innovate.
Yeah.
Right now, the hard part is finding a good plant-based protein powder
Yeah.
that actually has a great texture and taste and mix as well, and that also has a decent protein content.
Right.
um, Items. So it's like pumpkin seed butter, it's only about 60% protein.
Mm.
Watermelon seed butter, it's about 40%. And then hemp isolate is great, but the taste can be something left to be desired. So trying
Yeah.
to combine this into something that actually has a great flavor and texture
Yeah.
is the challenging part. In a lot of plant-based products and bars, they're just really hard for me to stomach. They're just too chalky, too
Yeah.
grainy, too dense.
Yeah. Do you, with your bars, do you try and avoid like grains? Like I know we talked a little bit about paleo stuff, but do you try and avoid like the legumes and the rice protein or pea protein stuff or?
So we've in terms of the rice isolate, truth be told, that mixes the best of any of the kind of, let's
Mm.
call them plant-based or non-dairy proteins.
Hmm.
Um, and then with a traditional, like a pumpkin seed isolate, the protein content is pretty low.
Mm.
A lot of our consumers love the fact that we can hit 15 grams.
Yeah.
So experimenting has just been really difficult in the plant-based category. I
Yeah.
still think there's a whole world of improvement, but also trying to keep the sugar content a lot lower. That's one of our biggest requests. How do you lower the sugar content? Trying to combine a good, great plant-based SKU
Hmm.
that also has natural derivatives of a sweetener with
Yeah.
that's low sugar is
Hmm.
really hard. Monk fruit still leaves a really nasty aftertaste.
Yeah.
Uh, Allulose it could be something that's up and coming, but it
Hmm.
can leave the bar just like rock hard like cement.
Mm.
So trying to find, and as you know, stevia can be just really strong,
Yeah.
and there's still some studies that show like it can cause a blood sugar spike. If your body
Yeah.
takes its sugar, it can
Hmm.
cause that insulin spike. So I think we're trying to innovate there with something lower in sugar that's still naturally derived, that's still minimal ingredient and plant-based.
Yeah.
We're hoping that over the next 6 months we can launch something that's incredible.
Yeah. Oh, cool. I'm excited. And I mean, speaking of like the plant-based protein bars too, I mean, those even hitting 15 grams of protein still kind of exceeds a lot of the other plant-based protein bars. I mean, if you look at that kind of world, I mean, that's still relatively, actually, I think it's probably pretty high or the highest, right? If you look at other bars, which is great because I do see with a lot of my vegan athletes is like the one thing they struggle the most with is like hitting enough protein throughout the course of the day based off of their sport and what their goals are and stuff. So yeah, I think that you have a great thing going on there for sure. I think that's awesome. And so with your kind of initial creation of Rise Bar and you being active, you said jujitsu and surfing and those things, did you initially want to target like an athletic audience, or was it kind of gen pop, or what were your kind of thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, ideally, I think it was for the just a generic broad term is the active lifestyle,
Yeah.
which the American Council of Nutrition kind of defines as roughly 200 million people, meaning they exercise they have higher levels of light exercise 3 times per week, so kind of
Mm-hmm.
moderate intensity. So
Yeah.
it's a big demographic. I would say early on, I found that it was actually our biggest demographic, and we only launched really in coastal Southern California. We had a lot of fit females in their 30s and 40s, kind of the really healthy, active mom that's always on the run that wants to share this with her family. And so, and for me, at the time, being a single guy, CrossFitter in my 30s, that was an adjustment for me. I thought, hey, maybe a bunch of CrossFitters and healthy guys, active guys, adventurers on the run who are really intense skydivers, kind of the Red Bull demographic. I
Yeah.
thought that would be our target demo, but
Mm.
it really, I mean, the evangelists and the tribe of females that we had in their 30s and 40s really propelled the brand. And so that's why if you look at our social media, a lot of our imagery, we try to be kind of gender neutral,
Hmm.
and it's more kind of inspirational, a simple snack to get you going. But
Yeah.
really, it's still heavily, we're about 60% of our consumer base is female, and primarily kind of between like 30 to 50 years old.
Yeah. Awesome. Whatever, whatever ends up working, right? I guess to get it
Absolutely.
out there. I do think, a lot of the athletes that like I'm working with and I'm talking about are always looking for something that's like, well, what do I do if I, finish my bike ride and I got to quickly, well, COVID right now, but run to the office or something like that. Right. And that honey almond bar is just, it's so easy to grab and get really close to their protein needs right after a session like that. And it's portable. And so I just love like having that option of something that I know is like good quality and simple
Yes.
ingredients, and which I think is just, people in the rush today need some easiness of sorts. And like you're saying, people could make it in their own kitchen, but they're not going to take the time to do that. So to have that convenience is really nice, and know that it is a good quality bar.
In general, we never market ourselves as a meal replacement,
Mm,
because it's never going to replace having some lean meat and protein and vegetables.
right.
So for us, it's like we're happy to be your portable on the go snack. It's never going to replace a meal, but if you need something to tide you over, you're on the go, you're active, you're hiking, you're not going to carry a massive sandwich while you're hiking. So
Right.
if you have like a 2 or 3 hour activity to do, you're on the go, you're busy. We're a fantastic kind of snack to supplement your everyday diet.
Yeah.
That's what I always tell people. Like, we never want to be seen as a meal replacement. We're always a really healthy, clean snack for
Yeah.
the active lifestyle, for people who are busy and on the go.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. And it is like a great one to do or use, like if you are going for a long hike, or like even backpacking and bringing along as a snack on the trail and stuff like that. So it is a great thing to have on hand. My question that I remember now was, do you ever get or play around with like different ways to basically maybe eat the bar? I've seen people take bars and like crumble them on top of smoothies or yogurt, or what's kind of the coolest way that you've seen people use your bars?
I one of the most for me on Instagram is we have a lot of really awesome influencers and foodie bloggers who create just amazing bowls. So that's
Cool.
what I've seen. And one of our biggest requests is you guys should make something small. Our kids, they don't need 20 grams of protein. Is there something more portable and smaller? So we are looking at different form factors, potential kind of like protein infused butters, so that it's easier
Mm,
for people to get a smaller serving size.
yeah.
But for us, really, I mean, we've people have made these delicious. Like right now, it's summertime, so just by like heating the bar a little bit, you can make a delicious, like healthy s'more, or a
Mm,
little portable sandwich on the go.
yummy.
That's one of the cool things about working with so many influencers and foodies, is that they're always coming up with awesome ways to incorporate our product as
Yeah.
part of like a balanced diet or breakfast or midday snack.
Yeah, so cool. Yeah, I had one of my clients tell me that they played around with the temperature of the bar, where they like put it in the fridge, and then other times they had it out on the counter. And I think they ended up liking it coming out of the fridge the most, the honey almond one, for some reason.
Heard that too. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm not sure what I think. I mean, it definitely kind of hardens it up a little bit. So I guess it's maybe a texture preference or something like that. But
And we have people who prefer to refrigerate the bars. These are all shelf-stable ingredients,
mhm,
but some people, they just prefer to have it there. It can preserve it for a little bit longer, but
yeah.
it's totally up to the consumer. Some people, they want to heat it up a little bit, because when you heat it up, and let's say you have it with like just a little bit of like a healthy whipped cream or tiny
Mm.
scoop of ice cream, it's a really delicious dessert that's
Yeah.
warm.
Yeah. That sounds really good. I'm gonna have to try that. So we had a couple questions come in from our Instagram story. We gave people heads up we were going to be speaking with you, and they are a bit kind of more business based, maybe a less bar nutrition based. But the first question was, knowing what you know now and do now about starting. Sorry, let me restart that. Knowing what you do know about starting a business and being an entrepreneur, what advice would you give your younger self starting a company?
Gosh, that's a really loaded question, and I think that's every entrepreneur is going to have a different answer. I think that, well, first of all, the brutal truth. I was raised by pretty strict parents who were always, they would just be very direct. So I kind of take that approach. It's incredibly difficult. And by that, it's not so much the hours that you put in, because every business is going to require a lot of time. There's a lot of stress and anxiety. That's the brutal truth. And certain people have different capacities to absorb that stress and anxiety. And I think the mistake that I made is not leaning on mentors early on in the process. I thought I could do a lot of this on my own, and largely I was able to do that. But a lot of the deep-seated stress and the worry and the problems that I encountered, I didn't want to ask for help. I thought I could just power through that. And so in recent years, I've kind of put together an informal network of mentors and other kind of advisors and entrepreneurs, and then a formal advisory board. So for someone early on in the process, having a really awesome sounding board who's been there before, it's kind of like a Sherpa going to Mount Everest.
Yeah.
There's no one can do it on their own. And so that's where I feel like I messed up. It's having the right mentor in place. And then lesson number 2 that I've learned, and I've read, over 100 different types of business books. And I think the one thing I find that a lot of them have in common is focus. And so figure out what is that one thing that you really feel is going to propel your business to the next level. Because it's so easy to trial and error and iterate a bunch, especially kind of in the software and R&D world of today. But if you're starting a small business and you have this killer idea, it doesn't mean you can't test or iterate, but really focus and go deep on this one area as opposed to trying 100 different things.
Yeah.
I think I was stretched in so many different directions as opposed to figuring out what I was truly good at. What I specialize in, for me personally, is I love the marketing and brand, like where we're headed, the overall vision and strategy. I'm not very good at the day-to-day. I'm not great necessarily at like the pure sales side of the business, pitching to new big customers, but I love being the mad scientist. And so for me, if I'd always spend a lot more time focusing there, as opposed to like supplementing the company with the right people, I would have saved a lot of time and stress. I was trying to handle too many things at once for way too long.
Yeah.
So for sure, 1, find mentors, and 2, be ready to focus and go deep. And the third thing related to all this is it is incredibly stressful. I still have yet to meet one entrepreneur who said, yeah, that was easy. That was no problem. Can't wait to do it again. The first couple of years, and even guys who've exited their business for 8 or 9 figures have said, sometimes we still wake up at night with that anxiety, like, uh-oh, what's going to happen next? When's the other shoe going to drop?
Yeah.
And so you can have all the optimism in the world, but having that resilience sometimes is just, it's hard to teach resilience until you're actually getting punched in the face.
Right. Yeah. It makes me think of Jocko Willink. Do you?
Yeah, he's incredible. I would love to meet him someday, but his podcast is amazing, and it's true.
Yeah.
Like Tyson said, you can have a game plan until you're punched in the face.
Right. Exactly. So bringing up the reading of a bunch of business books, do you have a favorite?
Oh, it's impossible to name favorites. Back here, I can see I have a stack of books.
Awesome.
I would say that, so for me, I would say the 4-Hour Workweek is the book that kind of got me into this whole, work for yourself. And it was such an amazing kind of an earthquake book that really shook me. At the same time, it also I think it set up the stage for a lot of entrepreneurs who thought they could have this awesome lifestyle brand and make, 6 figures a year, which is just like, we're talking a small percentage of the population.
Yeah.
But overall, I've read anywhere from, startup books, entrepreneurial books to, kind of the billionaire and Buffett's of the world. So I try to, get a lot of lessons from everywhere. But for anyone interested in starting their own business, especially in the early stages, one of the books that I love the most in terms of like learning how to kind of scale up and start something to get everyone aligned. Vern Harnish, entrepreneur based out of the East Coast. It's a book called The Rockefeller Habits, and it kind of helps you start and organize a business so that you actually have structure from day one. Awesome. And that's what I kind of use as a template, along with the Entrepreneur Operating System by Traction, which is also really, really helpful. Awesome. I could recommend, and in maybe your show notes, say, hey, this is my bibliography of my top 20.
Yeah.
that I still kind of reference.
That would be cool. Yeah, I'll have to get that from you and we can
Of
include
course.
that in the show notes for people who are listening and watching because I'm sure people are interested because again, most of the questions we got on Instagram were more about kind of business related stuff, honestly. So I think people are very interested in that. I'm interested in the nutrition, but I'll move on to the next question we had, which was kind of similar a little bit to the last one. They said, cool, just to hear about the process of starting a bar company. And I think we may have covered a little bit of this, so no need to repeat yourself, but they asked, did they experiment with recipes in the kitchen and then eventually and then eventually outsource it? How does all of that work? So I think we covered a bit of that, but if is there anything you want to add to that?
So we currently make all of our own products ourselves. And so
cool.
we've done that from the start, which is really unusual. I think less than 2% of food companies actually make their own product, which presents its own set of challenges. It's like running a highly efficient restaurant. And so that's the other part kind of taking up my headspace. It's always worrying about the operations, the manufacturing side. And so, there's a lot. The good news is I know with COVID right now, there's restrictions, but there are so many great test kitchens where you can rent out a little bit of space just to play around, experiment, meet other kind of food entrepreneurs and recipe developers. But
cool.
I would say for me, it was really important. I wanted to own quality every step of the way.
Yeah.
We've been manufacturing since day one, but that's highly unusual. I think for people who are launching food brands, any kind of brand, I've heard of too many horror stories with outsourcing, to the right operating partner and doing due diligence. And believe me, I wish I had better advice as to how to best source. For me, though, what I found, and I was just thinking about this a couple months ago, is as we hire people, as we have more partners helping us grow the business, I've realized that of my best employees and partners and agencies I've worked with, like 4 out of 5 of them came from referrals. So for me, I always thought I could find, talent in the middle of nowhere. And I was, smart enough to figure this out on my own. But I realized, man, referrals have been like 80 to 90% of my success.
Yeah.
And people who I trust who have recommended this person or partner.
Yeah.
And the times where experiments have bombed was where I felt like I could vet this all on my own.
Yeah.
And so for me, like as anyone looking to launch a brand with a certain partner, like I can't imagine ever going with someone who's not a referral again.
Yeah. That's really interesting that you say that. With nutrition, my business, like totally obviously different area, but I have had people who have wanted to like intern and all that stuff. And they always ask me the question, like, how do you get your clients and blah, blah, blah. And like, I tell them like 99% of my clients are all from referral and maybe like 1% is from like advertising on social media or something like that. So, I mean, if you can get that good relationship with your audience or your peers, and then like their referral is the best advertising and marketing you can get. So yeah, I think that's, I see that as well here. So I love that. And let's see, one kind of final question for you. What is your favorite Rise Bar version or flavor?
It fluctuates. Right now, we launched a coffee bar, and I don't know if you're a coffee fan. I know people are different on caffeine.
Yeah.
I personally, have moderate doses of whether it's matcha or coffee. Our mocha almond bar, it's delicious. So for us, we just launched it a few months ago, and for me, because I don't like to have like a full. I'm not a 2 cups of coffee person. It's only about 20 milligrams of caffeine, coffee sourced from Colombia. And so that one's currently my favorite one with, moderate dose of protein, only 5 ingredients, it combines honey with almond butter and then a little bit of, it's kind of a mocha almond flavor. So that's right now.
That sounds really good. I'll have to check that one out. And I know we do have a lot of big coffee consumers for sure in the endurance athlete world. So I'm sure people will be checking that out. And then what are kind of I know you mentioned something new might be coming out in the next 6 months, but what are kind of the upcoming goals for Rise, if you're allowed to, whatever you're allowed to share?
Of course. I think one of the things that I realized 3 years ago, our business, we were heavily at retail, as you noticed, with Costco, Sprouts, Whole Foods, accounts like that. We've really pivoted over the last year because I think that there's such a world of online e-commerce influencers, a lot of at-home fitness coaches and nutritionists. And so the power of that referral, it's some people don't, especially now, they don't want to go to a grocery store. They're kind of being very sparing and limited about how they approach going to places. So the fact that we've pivoted the business heavily to now on, that's the main goal for us forward, is how do we continue to, to kind of spread the word and build our online tribe and our e-commerce space. So that's really the main goal. We'll continue to innovate and launch items and products, but for us right now, especially during the whole pandemic, we've seen a lot of people who prefer to buy portable snacks on the go, little things they can have at home. And we've seen just tremendous spike in our e-commerce. So all of my efforts right now over the next 6 months to the indefinite future are just how do we continue to drive our e-commerce business and our social media and kind of our whole online community.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I mean, especially with the initial shelter in place, at least that we had here in California, was, stock up with at least 2 weeks worth of food, and Rise bars being shelf stable. I mean, that's a great thing to have on hand too. And then let's see, my other question for the viewers and listeners is, where can people get your bars? Like, are they available worldwide, or is it just within the United States?
Yeah, no, it's right now we're currently domestically United States. We are admittedly more concentrated in kind of the major cities than Los Angeles, Bay Area, New York, Austin. I'd say for people interested in trying us out, so on our website, we have a sampler pack of our top 4 flavors. It's $9, free shipping. So it's kind of a good way to test the brand out on risebar.com. But really for us, I think for ease of use for everyone, between our website, between Amazon and other online customers, I think that's a surefire way for us to get a fresh product that's, has probably been made less than a month ago, and just really accessible for people who are at home who don't want to go out to a grocery store.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, I think that is it for today. You had mentioned people can get it on risebar.com, and then they can also find it on Amazon, right?
Those are definitely the 2 best places, easiest places.
Perfect. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Peter. Any last final words?
I don't think so, Kyle. I mean, if anyone has questions about starting a business, nutrition and fitness, you can always connect with me. My email is peter@risebar.com. Happy to answer any questions or lend advice to budding entrepreneurs who are kind of afraid to take the leap or need some advice on starting a business. So I always try to be a resource. Thankfully, I have a lot of good mentors now. So that's my kind of way of paying it forward. If anyone has questions about starting a business, I'm always happy to be a resource.
I love that. That's very cool. That's very cool. I'm sure people are going to be using that email. So be prepared. Awesome. Very cool. Well, thank you again so much, Peter, for coming on and letting us pick your brain and hear more about the Rise Bar world. Hopefully some people will jump on that, because like I said, I love the bar, and it's a great one to refer to clients because it's easy and it's clean and it's simple. So hopefully we can turn some more athletes or endurance athletes onto it, at least, for sure. Awesome. Well, we will get those in the show notes for everybody listening and viewing the books, some Rise Bar links, all of that stuff. So stay tuned, and thanks for listening.
Thanks for having me, Kyle. It's been a pleasure.
Of course.